um, at this point, and then as people are joining in, we'll just get them to come in. So my name is Anita, and I am one of the co-founders for Kajenga Wellness Project. And just to start off our evening, I do want to do an acknowledgement. The Kajenga Wellness Project acknowledges that many indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which agency is located. We acknowledge that these relationships were harmful and damaging and created trauma that is still healing. Today, this area is home to many indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississaugas peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that I can't, sorry, I'm not able to see further down.
We teach, learn, and live.
Thank you. So for today, as everyone knows, thank you for joining us. We will be talking about Your Kids Are Not Lazy. This will be a crash course in understanding child development. And our presenters I would like to introduce you to. So our first presenter will be Melissa Perryman. She's an educator at Durham District School Board. She's a former foster parent, a former residence counselor, and a former child and youth worker. Our second presenter will be Nicole Perryman. She's a social worker, equity leader, psychotherapist. She's owner of asset group Kajenga Wellness Project and Ifrata Center for Excellence, play therapist, and writer. So for our evening, this is what our agenda will look like. So we've already done the acknowledgement and introduction. We're going to speak about the goals for our presentation. We're going to be exploring child development. So a quick snapshot, nothing too, we're not in university, so nothing too detailed. Childhood disrupted, why does it matter, engagement strategies, and the best thing of all, giveaway at the end.
So thank you so much for having us. Yes, my name is Nicole Perryman. I'm happy to be joined here with my sister, Melissa, younger sister, if anyone's wondering, and no, we're not twins. We had the pleasure of fostering in 2008 and continued for 10 years until our littlest one grew up, became 21 and left the nest. And so we are happy here to present this presentation for you. I'd like to mention an acknowledgement for our Black community. We know that we've experienced repeated racism and trauma, and we like to acknowledge our ancestors who were forced into slavery and to build North America without compensation. I'd also like to acknowledge our ancestors who fought for freedom, equal rights and pay, the right to vote, to partake in society, and to feel safe in their homes and their communities. Even today, as many of our family members down south and in the Americas had to vote, we celebrate their rights that they've accomplished that. And we acknowledge that Canada has denied the rights of Black Canadians repeatedly. And we're talking about parenting today. So part of understanding parenting is understanding our ancestors who brought us to this place. And I'd like to take a moment to remember, and you can also take a moment to remember your mamas, your aunties, your grandmothers, and those people who played a central role in taking care of you or helping you develop. And I'd like to remember some of my aunties, Auntie Faye, Auntie Lucille, who passed away this week, Auntie Merle, Auntie Flory, Auntie Dolly. I knew I would do this. Grandma Clussfield and Grandma Rita. And their history, their hardship that they fought, the dreams that they have lay within me and within Melissa as well. We'd like you to think about who taught you your parenting skills, what books informed your knowledge, and what experiences shaped you as a mom or a father, a caregiver, as we take you on a journey of understanding your child. So again, yes, I'm Melissa, and lots of years of foster parenting and working with youth as a child and youth worker in residence and group homes, and now as a teacher. We've got a lot of knowledge that we want to share just to kind of give some light on certain areas, and we want to discuss like healthy development, what that looks like. Sometimes there's no rule book. The kids don't come with an instruction manual or what's normal and healthy at this stage. We want to also identify any disruptions that may occur that may interrupt the development. So again, going through different things that could harm the development of a child, and some strategies. So I would have loved some strategies as foster parenting to help with children regardless of their experiences, and just really trying to just shed some light in this 1.5 to 2 hour presentation. So we called it Your Kids Are Not Lazy, because I've often hear from parents, you know, my child is lazy, and no matter whether they're 6 years old or 19, 20, I have a 20-year-old here, 27, who may still be living at home. We wanted to kind of acknowledge that, yes, as parents, there's challenges that you experience with your child. I often hear people tell me, you know, my child is a liar sometimes. They don't always like to tell the truth, or they're manipulative, and so much more. But I'd like to reassure you that your children are none of those things. They are dependent upon their environment to grow and to develop, and they're depending on skills that they actually haven't developed yet. And so we'll talk about that in our presentation today. So reassuring you that your child is not lazy. We know that, you know, our young children also experience difficulties in their life. We know that Black children experience higher proportion. A lot of outcomes are mired by racism, by systemic oppression. And so we understand and acknowledge that those things are part of their development and will place them at risk. We know that your role as a parent, a caregiver, an auntie, an uncle in a child's life can really help to build their resiliency. And so we'll talk about that. And we'll talk about ways of how to shape a better future for young people, and also how to support young people who are struggling within their life. Very old quote, the child is a tabula rasa, which I'm going to teach you that actually it's both. Yes, they are a blank slate that you can fill in with greatness and mold them into greatness, but they're also, you know, built in with intergenerational experiences. As I shared before, ancestors who live within us that influence our development and our movement throughout the world. So I'm going to go briefly over childhood development. So we're going to look at a couple theories and theorists who just broke down the stages. And of course, not every child fits perfectly into these molds, but we're just going to kind of get an overview and idea of the general child. And they're all different, right? Like everyone has a different viewpoint of how children develop. Yeah, 100%. And also looking at through a cultural lens, because where are we represented in this data, in these theories, right? So it's always important to really reflect on who is writing these theories, who is giving us the information. And as I did psychology in university, but also where were we? Like, how is our history represented? How is our knowledge? How were we developed as a people? So it starts with prenatal and by prenatal care. So, and then it goes into infancy, 0 to 18 months roughly, early childhood, preschool, school-age children, and then often into adolescent and adulthood. So we'll just keep it from prenatal to adolescent, and then and explore them a little bit further. And then this is Erikson's stages of development. So again, he goes into a little bit of like in infancy, the child goes through trust and mistrust, and you can tell where babies don't go to certain people, or they will only like their mom, or they're only like different things. So you can see that they have those stages of, oh, okay, who can I trust? They're feeling out the world, they're feeling out their senses. Again, into early childhood, they're getting some independence and like they're potty training, and they're developing shame and doubt, and they're going through those stages. also we go into, after that, preschool. So that's a whole different thing where they're being more independent and they're realizing that they're different from their parents, and they get into guilt and different feelings such as that. And they try to build relationships with peers and others, and they go into different making friends, and they'll have a new friend each day, but it's different and exciting for them. And then when they get into school age, right now I'm teaching a school age section. So that is where key core friendships are trying to be built. And that's where you see a lot of children will compare themselves to their peers, or they want what their friends are having, or their friends become very, very key in their lives. And you see a lot of that. And it's so important to build and harvest friendships within that age range. And then adolescence, you know, the identity role confusion, you've seen it, you've heard it. They try different things, they want to figure out who they are, they go into different stages, but it's always important to nurture them and help each child explore each stage. So then we look into like different theories. So Pagat, he theorized that children think differently than adults, and we can see that. We know children don't have the same understanding that adults may have, or they don't process things the same way. And he also said that children shape things through different experiences, with their brains are different. So they haven't developed the reasoning and the thought process and the skills that they haven't developed the processes and the skills yet. So they always have to pass through certain stages. Vygotsky, he was theorized more, it's like a social and a learning process, and that children learn through the interactions with others. So it's more of a social and a community development. And we can see that with the Caribbean communities. It's very social, it's very aunties raise you, you have lots of family members involved. So different things play a part in that. And also there's also the adverse childhood development. And that's to say that if children have like negative childhood experiences, that can impact their development and their mental health, and that can impact them later on in life. So there's these different theories that have just different ideas about the childhood development, but it all combines, it all works together. And again, adverse childhood development can impact everything altogether. So a death or trauma, abuse, all those things can also hinder that development. So what does all of that mean, Melissa? Thank you for asking. Like, why? Essentially, there's several factors. So we know that whether it's nature or nurture, there's different factors that shape and mold your children. So we just want you to think back to your childhood experiences and think back to how you were parented, and how is your parenting style shaped, how is being parented shaped your parenting style. So for me, I am my mother's child. I just like her as a parent. When I parented my foster children, I really adapted to those things. But how does that shape you? It was very strict. It was very like a government style parenting, but that's how I became. So do you parent similarly or different to your parents? Some people are like, I'm not doing what my parents did. My parents beat me every day, and I never touched my child. So but that impacts how you parent. So how we want to do a poll out. Oh, did we do the poll? Oh, we wanted to do a poll out and just to see how is your parenting style affected? So the question is, how does your parenting style align with your parents' parenting style? A little bit of a tongue twister. Either none at all, my parents did it all wrong. A little, I take some of their good points. Half and half, equally my parents and my own style, or I am my parents' child, and I am 100% my parents' child. So we'll see what everybody else says. No one else says it. No one's their parents' child. Oh, one. So I'll end in 30 seconds. Oh, you ended it? Okay. Is that it? All right, so majority say half and half, equally my parents, and I have my own style. Some 12% said none at all, my parents did it all wrong. Some were like a little. I take a bit, like a good portion actually. I say it's half and half. Say I take some of their good styles, and 6%, which is me included, I am my parents' child, said something different. So that's really, really interesting to note that, yes, your parents don't always have it all together. And it's important to note that you as parents, we don't always need to have it all together. We're learning to as well. I just want to go back to the cultural lens though for a bit, just to reiterate that, again, with all these theorists that we have, we also have to look at things from a cultural perspective. And me being of Caribbean descent, I'll speak mainly to the Caribbean descent. My parents are Trinidadian, so they were born and raised there and came to Canada in their 30s, so a little bit later. So they kept a lot of their parenting styles and their ways from how they were raised. So they were very Caribbean West Indian parents, and they did not mesh with the Western.
They were extremely strict.
Western way
They
of
were
parenting.
extremely strict. We had to go to school with pigtails and ribbons and socks all pretty up. They were very strict parents. So I don't know.
But if you look at the past, in the Caribbean, childhood was damaged by the institution of slavery. So like having children and keeping children, like I always read a fact that child mortality was the highest among slaves, and slave owners found it cheaper to import slaves than allow their existing ones to bring up their children. So putting that into context, it's cheaper to import a slave than to have someone raise their own child. So of course they're strict. They don't want us to be hurt. And I think of the point where my parents were like, you need to listen. And that was really huge for them as listening. But then you think back into slavery, if you didn't listen, or if as a child you weren't listening, that could mean life or death. That could mean a lot of jeopardy. So I think it's always important to look at their perspective. Me being my parents' child, and they were super strict and I rebelled, but just having that idea that, you know what, this is passed down from generations, the history of the impact of slavery.
I'd also like to mention, as we talk about these experiences, even our own experience, if there's things that come up for you, feel free to use our chat or question and answer. We'll definitely give some time at the breaks to kind of explore your questions, and also want to hear your snippets too, like how you answered our last poll. Please feel free to share it with the group.
And then I'm just gonna go briefly through those stages a little bit more and give different tips and strategies of what you can do if your child is at that stage. So prenatal stress can indirectly affect infant development and health by increasing the occurrence of adverse pregnancy outcomes. So it starts in prenatal care too as well. So taking care of someone else, taking care of a child, starts with you. You need to take care of yourself first. And so newborns develop their emotional stage, and research says that at 6 months in utero, babies can detect emotions. So being stressed out, having stressed out pregnancy, or being always worried and anxious, that could impact the fetus. And stress is shown, studies have shown that. So stress can affect the pregnancy, immediate and long term. So it could cause like an anxious child, or it could affect it. So that's what studies say. So it's always important to take care of yourself, and mental well-being, emotional well-being is so important. So what you can do, get enough sleep, ask for support. And I think as our community, we're starting to create supports and try to really build up our community that we can offer and get supports. Because I think as my parents immigrated here, they were by themselves. So we didn't have family, we didn't have a support system. And it's so important that there is support for anything. So it's a village, it takes a village to raise a child, and it's so important to have that support there. And practice mindfulness, really being calm and just going through your own self-care. And self-care is being forgiving to yourself, allowing yourself to make mistakes, developing good strategies. All those good things can help you when you're pregnant in that prenatal stage, and it helps the baby. They say classical music, all those things help it. But it's important to note that, yes, being stressed out, and especially during this time, can impact the baby.
So infancy and toddler age. This is my favorite age. We had a foster baby when he was 5 days old until he was 18 months. So this wonderful age here. This is where they're exploring the world. They're putting everything in their mouths. They're realizing different objects, and they know that if they cry, someone's going to come for them. So actions make things happen. And they're starting to learn that they are separate beings. So what you can do at this stage is to be responsive and nurturing. There's studies show that being unresponsive or inconsistently responsive with your baby can create attachment. I think we're going to talk about that later, different attachments. So just being responsive, nurturing, engaging, interacting, playing with them. I know some people believe in like the sleep training, but it's so important for the baby to develop that relationship and know that they can depend on you, provide lots of nutrients and community connections. And again, we will always want to go back to the village because they need that, especially now at this time, trying to create a network. I know it's so hard with everything being closed down, but also harvesting like Zoom has been really great that we even have people from Alberta here. So just having networks of relationships and people you can talk to. Does this look normal? I think my baby nephew, he stubbed his toe, and just my sister took a picture and is like, does this look normal? Like, does this toenail color look normal? And just being able to have that community connections there that you can bounce those ideas off of. And then you get into early childhood where they start that symbolic thinking, and they develop memory and they develop imagination. And what you can do is that play. So I know in schools, they changed the whole curriculum so it's play-based learning because they can do so much problem solving, so much learning, and brain development happens during those stages. We have like they'll play with the boxes, they'll play with different trinkets, just engage and be active with them. Providing those community connections. This is also an important stage where you develop their memory. So asking them to tell stories. So how was your day? What did you do today? What did we just do? Just making them build that memory piece for them. And then it's also important for emotionally, and we might touch on that a little bit later, but letting them know that emotions are temporary. So sometimes if they bump their toe or they hit their hand, to know that you're not always going to feel pain, that it's temporary. It doesn't last forever. And they can even learn mindfulness and calm breaths and deep breathing. So they would love that because that's where they like to mold and do what you do. So practice that with them. So we have a scenario for you, and feel free to use the chat or the question and answer if you want to respond. So it's 8:20 in the morning. Every parent, okay, pre-COVID, knows this. 8:20 in the morning, it's time for your child to be out the door, but they're having a fit. They're like, I don't want to go to school. I don't want to do it. I don't want to get dressed. What do? What are some suggestions? And feel free to use the chat. Oh. Do a race. I like that. Make it fun. Make it a game. Play. Yes. Play the music. Yes. All right. You guys are good. You're good to go. You passed. Awesome. Yes. So you winner. Yeah. Oh, we got more. Okay. A couple more. Pre-plan everything. Time is precious. Have them pick up the outfit. The night before, for sure. Yep. You always want to plan ahead. You never want to engage in a power struggle with a child. You want to be able to give them the options, make them feel empowered. Oh, this is fun. Let's put on our pants. Yes. All those suggestions. Perfect. Let them have ownership in that outfit. Oh, you want to wear this purple top with that orange sweater? That looks fantastic. That looks great, right? Really, that's fantastic. Oh, so I launched a poll afterwards, but feel free to respond. That was the poll.
definitely, I think this has changed, right? Because I remember when I was little and I was like, didn't want to go places, or even when my daughter was younger and she didn't want to go places, our initial reaction is like, no, we need to go, let's go. And we start reacting to their behavior. And so what we're hoping to instill is really, encourage you to look at alternative ways of encouraging your child to do amazing. So thank you. Thanks for that for everyone.
Yeah, definitely make it a game, because that's the stage that they're at, and meet them where they're at. Awesome.
Yeah, and sleep is important too. Absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing, guys.
So we get into the school age. They develop those logical thinking, concrete reasoning skills. They've got unique thoughts and feelings. They can think abstractly or hypothetically, which is fantastic. At this age, it's also a good idea to play what would you do games. So a lot of what would you do if your friend hit you? Or what would you do if you saw someone getting pushed? Like different hypothetical questions that they can respond to, and real life situations, make it real for them, right? So you can also listen and repeat what they are saying so that they understand. A lot of nonverbal communications big at this stage. Ask questions, just keep asking questions and building those connections. And then labeling those feelings too as well. So I'm scared, and it's that experience is not permanent. So yes, I may be scared, but it's not a permanent feeling. That's always important to note, that those feelings are temporary and that they don't stay with you forever, and you are not your feelings.
I also found this stage, the drives back home from different places were the best. I got the best information from a 9-year-old in the back when she's sitting in the back seat of the car and just sharing like her day and what she's up to and all the things that she's experienced. So creating those opportunities, absolutely, to connect with them and communicate is really important.
Yeah, that builds the memory piece, that builds the reasoning piece, and then you can say, oh, okay, maybe we could look at different situations differently. That's phenomenal. They love to talk in the car. Even I do too. Sometimes I would like to call my mom when I'm in the car driving, because you just like that conversation during that dead air time.
Oh, sorry.
Adolescence. So this is fun. We fostered 3 grade 7 girls at the same time. So 3 12-year-old girls in our house at the same time. So this is not exactly my favorite stage of age, but it is so crucial, so important to who they become. They develop those abstract thoughts. They think systematically about things. They think about relationships and concepts of justice. They're really empowered at that stage because they're developing their own thoughts. And this is a good time to connect. So we did a lot when we worked with the foster girls. We had a lot of connection, a lot of movie nights, a lot of self-care nights, a lot of pampering, like just connecting and building experiences. And again, with that talking, okay, discussing alternatives to situations, like what could you have done better at this, or what could you do? I mean, in the moment, there's a lot of emotions, and it doesn't always, they don't always are able to ration and realize, but always having that conversation with them ongoing, so that you're not always trying to calm them down, but you're ongoing. You're telling them, okay, if someone steals your lip gloss, what's a way you can react to that? Always encourage them. Movement's always very huge. Movement breaks, and scrapbooking is really important to help keep their memories, and it's a good outlet. Mindfulness, and like we said, increase that family time, right? The movie nights and doing stuff. So one of the biggest rewards the children wanted was just to spend time one-to-one with an adult, or just to spend time and have that someone there with the undivided attention.
And I just wanted to mention too, when you were saying that, I mean, there's lots of things that they do develop during this age, but the one thing I don't see is what parents really struggle with the most is things like empathy and remorse. And to be honest, research shows that empathy doesn't develop until well into your 20s, like the ability to take someone's perspective. We often have parents coming, why don't they understand the ramifications of what they did, or why don't they, see my side and my point of view? But that's really a skill that you have to teach your kids.
100%. Yeah. Even I had an incident in
at school, and one of the students, so I'm teaching online. I'll just give you a little bit of background. I'm teaching online, and I spend a lot of time planning lessons because we don't have any resources or supports. So fund the schools is all I have to say. But it's new. So I'm teaching online, we're creating lessons, we're making everything digital. And I had one student do vomit emoji. This is the worst work ever, commented under one of my assignments. Okay. So I was very upset. So I labeled it. So I said, you know what? This hurts my feelings. So for me, I spend a lot of time and care to plan, but it hurts my feelings that you vomit emoji over the work that I send you. And just so that they have that context, so they feel that, okay, oh, she has an emotion there. And we addressed it and moved on. But just that idea that you have to label it and really try to help them with that empathy piece, because they don't get it yet. And their brain is not there yet. That's why. So just to recap, child's development therapists seek to explain how children develop in terms of how the brain, physical, emotional, thinking, and learning all come together. These theories help us to understand our child's behavior and their perspectives of themselves and their interactions with this world. I mean, it's always developing, but it gives us a good idea to know that, okay, you know what, if they're not understanding this, their brain is still developing. They're still developing. They're really trying. We are the ones that have to mold and shape them and give them those guidance. So what skills do parents need? So parents need to exercise patience, create spaces for growth, development, and stability, and be consistently learning and engaging in skills. So there's no parenting courses. It takes longer to become a police officer than to be a parent. It takes longer to become a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer. There's no skills or processes that we go through to get those experiences. And that's what we need to do, that we should always be constantly learning and engaging in new skills and always keep an open mind.
Absolutely. And we'd like to take some time right now just to answer some of your questions. Thank you so much, Melissa, for providing such a really good understanding of early childhood development in a crash course, literally a crash course. A BA in psychology. There you go. I took Soch though. Any questions? Oh, I guess it was that self-explanatory.
There's no question yet.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
All right, so we're right on time.
Okay, thank you. So we're gonna switch gears almost. So sorry, I was reading the chats, multitasking. We're gonna switch gears. I'd like you to read this comment and take some time to be mindful.
Oh, how did the things work out after the vomit emoji incident? I think she was sad that she did that. And they haven't vomit emojied after my work yet. So it worked out, but I had to, like, I laughed at it, like I was upset, but I laugh at it because they're kids. But it's good to say, you know what, that made me feel sad. And I think sometimes as adults, we want to feel like we don't have emotion, or we want to feel like, especially even as teachers, that nothing affects us. But we have to say, you know what, that hurt my feelings. Like, what are you doing? And they haven't vomit emoji on my work. Or at least it wasn't the poop emoji, but like they haven't done it since. But thanks for asking.
So I'm gonna again show this slide and want you to just take a moment to just think about it and think about what that means. What happens when something goes wrong. So initially our first reaction is to think that, our child lacks motivation, they're lazy, they're not pulling their weight, they're not motivated, and those kind of things come into our mind when we see a child or experience behaviors with a child that is something that you don't normally see with that child.
And so 1 in 5 children really means, if you look at a group of children in a classroom and there's 20 kids, there's 5 of them. Or you think of 5 children that you know, 1 of them is struggling with mental health concerns. And so pay attention as we talk about, these difficult experiences that young people may experience. Pay attention to how your body and your heart is feeling, because it's definitely going to evoke emotion as we talk about, what children's experiences may then impact their development and their behavior that you see from them. So very critical to what we discussed was around attachment. And so each of these stages that Melissa shared with us is really dependent upon that attachment bond. And that attachment bond begins from when that baby is in the mother's womb. That's when that attachment begins. And so that bond is developed and throughout time gets reaffirmed, becomes stronger, or it starts to weaken and becomes disrupted. We used to believe that you just need to bond with your mom, and then that will determine your bonding when you become an adult, in your partnerships, in your future. But we've learned that it's different. We've learned that attachment is something that can be forged with different people in different ways, which is really good, because sometimes you may not have a well mom, or sometimes you may not have a well dad, but you might be able to develop a really close attachment with an auntie or with a grandma, and that person creates the impetus for change for that young person. Attachment really solidifies a lot for young people in terms of their trust within the world, within themselves, so even trusting themselves, as well as their emotions, being able to understand emotions and to actually feel emotions and be okay to feel emotions. And so I put together a list of some key things that attachment is part of. So it's definitely part of our emotional bonding. So our being able to feel connected to others and to ourselves, to be able to develop really healthy relationships. It's also about trust. And so as we know, even when teenagers and they start to question trust, or they start to connect trust with respect and loyalty, all of that has to do with their attachment. Believe it or not, attachment is also connected to independence. So young people feel okay to venture out into this great beyond world and do new things and take risks because of that secure attachment that they develop. It also provides implications for personal relationships, professional relationships, even your colleagues at work. A lot of the times that you see some interactions with them can be determined or can be influenced by early attachments that they had growing up. And the last and probably the most important for me is how attachment helps to regulate our emotions. So our connection as sisters, when she has something going on, my ability to connect with her and my ability to bond with her helps to bring her down when she's upset. And similar with a baby, right? A baby that and you're able to hold that baby and rock them and sing to them brings them all the way down. And so that speaks to how attachment also is able to let that person know, I'm okay. The world is okay. And whatever you're feeling in that moment is okay. And so like I shared, and hopefully this sticks with you in terms of attachment, starts from very little, prenatal, and continues to grow throughout their lifespan. You would see, as Melissa shared, that when young people are quite younger, up until 7 months, there's times when they're indiscriminate. So anyone who shows them love is all good for them and they're okay with it. And that's the best time of babies, because you can hold them and love them up and give them back to their mamas and papas. And similar with as they get older. So as they get older to 7 and 11 months, they start to know the difference. They know your smell, they know your voice, they know you're different than other people, and they show that discrimination. I'm lucky though, my little nephew, he doesn't do that, eh?
He loves
everybody.
He
He loves everybody.
He doesn't love one person.
There's
he
one
loves,
person that's
right,
like,
but he loves most people.
yeah.
And then as you know, young people get older from 9 months and up, they learn to develop relationships or connections with others. And so that's really important part of that village of connections that that young person develops, which is healthy. And it helps them to know that if things are not the best with mom or dad or grandma or grandpa, that I got an auntie over here that loves me, and I've got an uncle or a cousin that I can go to for support. And that's what you want. You want to be able to have different places for your child to develop those connections. So then we talk about adverse childhood experiences. And I don't want to scare you because it can be scary to look at those numbers, but it shows that there was a study years ago that looked at, you know, children who've had really difficult experiences. How does that impact them in the long run? How does that impact them as adults? How does it impact their outcomes in health-wise? How does it impact their outcomes with death and life and different experiences? And they found that young people who had a lot of difficulties in their upbringing led to more risk as they got older with health outcomes. And so difficulties that stem from being abused, whether it's physical, emotional, sexual abuse, neglect, which can include, you know, not being able to have their emotional needs met in a healthy way, or any household dysfunction. So having a parent that's struggling with depression or anxiety, having a relative that's been incarcerated that lives in the home, having a mother being treated violently, any family member overusing substances like drugs or alcohol or marijuana, or divorce and separation. So the information that's provided is more of these adverse conditions or adverse experiences that young people have will then impact them as they get older. And at risk kind of looks like this. And so it begins to impact their development from very young age. It changes the way that their brain is developing because of those adverse experiences. And then it goes up. So it creates challenges with their social, emotional, cognitive development. So just as Melissa shared around, you know, how people are supposed to meet certain stages sequentially, when you have adverse childhood experiences, it doesn't happen that way. And it's challenges they end up having with their learning or with their social skills, or even managing their emotions. So having temper tantrums, or, you know, having lots of regulatory issues with transitions. As they get older, it can lead to further problems with the law, or further problems with finding jobs or maintaining employment. It can also look like early diseases or death. Why this is important is because it teaches us that intervention or meeting the needs of a child is really important. Building resiliency is really important to change the outcomes for young people. And part of that is when you notice a child, your own child or another child who's gone through difficult experiences, by us attending to those needs goes wonders into building resiliency and reducing the negative outcomes that could happen if they don't get support. And this is a big term, it's trauma. So most of the time people think trauma is something major that happens to someone and they have a really hard time dealing or managing from it, which is actually true. But there's also a greater definition around that. So I think right now we've all experienced the global pandemic. It is a traumatic event. It is a traumatic event for myself, for Melissa, for many people here on the call today. And that traumatic event doesn't mean that it's going to lead to further issues down the road. What it does mean is that without support and without getting the right support, it can lead to feelings of continued stress down the line. So definitely trauma is a response to the crisis that we've experienced, and that changes our psychological, so how we think, and then how we manage our emotions. Most of the time when things happen to people,
it impacts them in several different ways. And so I've listed, many of these different ways that it can impact people. And also, you may find yourself too, as you're floating through, or we're managing through the global pandemic, that has impacted us in one of these different ways. It's important that when we understand trauma and how it impacts people, that we not focus on the behaviors or what we're seeing, but we focus on what has happened to you, not what you did wrong, not what the problem is, but what happened to you. And once you be able to identify what some of those issues or challenges are, then you really begin to support that young person in moving forward. So what does some of those behaviors look like? And I'm not going to go through every single one of them. Feel free to check back our website, because I will definitely create some articles for information. But you might see it as feelings of sadness or helplessness, feeling out of control, feeling overwhelmed or stressed. I've definitely heard that from my 20-year-old adult a couple of times, that she feels stressed. It might be impacted by, even the physical responses. So heavy breathing, stomach aches all the time, headaches, not wanting to go to school, appetite changes. So eating a little bit too much, or hiding food, or not eating at all, or not feeling like they want to eat. It might also look like, difficulty focusing, concentrating on things. Their test marks have decreased or changed over time. It may look like, withdrawal from different activities. So at one point they were hanging out with their friends, and all of a sudden they stopped doing that. They don't want to go anywhere. It can also look like a young person who is very outgoing and engaging and sociable, and now they're withdrawn and they're keeping to themselves. For behaviors, it might look like restlessness, not sleeping very well, having nightmares at night, having, wanting to avoid different things, wanting to avoid social interactions with others. And sometimes it can look at existential and spiritual. So not wanting to go to church or the mosque, or, feeling like there's no point. And I definitely, over the last 9 months, have been exposed to and worked with young people who've had those thoughts or had those feelings, right? And these are children who are in very well, healthy families, but because of what's been happening with the pandemic, really start to question themselves, their mortality, their life rate, the disease, and how it's impacting themselves and other people in their family they're close to.
Oh, well, it even impacted me. I'm like taking some of those physical, cognitive during the whole pandemic too as well. So for sure, and as an adult, being able to process how so much can children and youth actually really process that.
Absolutely.
What's going on, for sure.
And I know you're an online school teacher, but I can only imagine what it's like for kids in the classroom, and what that experience is, and how different it looks to go to school than it did in January of 2020. So a list of traumatic events that can impact children, and I listed as much as I can think of, but I'm sure there's absolutely more that that can happen. But I put global pandemic at the top of the list because that's definitely something that we're experiencing. But it can also include a close person dying, and whether it's a sudden, so grandma was, doing really well, and then she suddenly passes away from COVID. That is an experience of trauma. Having a violent loss, having multiple school transitions. So believe it or not, children who go to multiple different schools, every single time they switch to a new school, they've lost 6 months of their school year. And so even just that transition of getting to know new kids, getting to know the routine, getting to know the structure can really impact them in very difficult ways. And so it's important to pay attention to that. Divorce or separation, absolutely. It's not the same outcomes, I think, that people thought 20 years ago, but I definitely think that if there's continued conflict, or there's continued issue that happens within divorce and separation, it's important to ensure that your child gets support with those experiences. Having a parent that's incarcerated, being part of accidents or house fires, experiences of bullying. And bullying can also look like social media bullying. I think up until, recently, 11-year-old kid was experiencing bullying on the internet when playing their games. And so, being really aware of those experiences, whether there's violence within the community, is just as impactful then, as well as having violence in sorry, did I say community? Violence in the family can very much impact a child as much as violence in their community. So if you live in a community that's not typically always safe, or has some difficulties within that community, it definitely can make a difference. And I recall too, we grew up in Oshawa, it's very quiet, not much going on. And so there, once a year, we used to travel to New York to go visit my cousins and the Queens. And all I can remember was sirens up and down the street the whole night. I couldn't even sleep. And I can only imagine what that experience is like for those kids or those people who live in that environment all the time. I was traumatized. I don't think I've been back to the Queens ever since. So I was like, I don't want to live in this environment, but definitely can influence your development.
I have two questions here. And before you go further, I would like to say these questions to you to provide answers. So, it's really hard not to react to children. How can we transfer that energy positively? This is from an attendee. That's question number one. And then number two says, how can we identify mental health issues in your child? How can we identify mental health issues in your child?
It's really good. I think definitely we can probably answer the first question later in the presentation when I talk about the strategies, but I'll put a note to make sure that I do that. And because it also comes with a bunch of other ones too that might be helpful. And the mental health stuff, and I think I'll get to that in a couple slides as well, but just to highlight, if I mention some of these behaviors that you're noticing, and if you're noticing, changes within your child, whether, how they speak or their behavior patterns or sleep patterns, take note of those, make a journal. You don't always have to, badger your child. What's going on? What's going on? What's happening? What are you doing? But you can also just, take note of those things. And whenever, they're in a good space or you did some really good bonding with them, you can ask some questions about what's going on or what's happening. I had the pleasure, well, I don't know, it's kind of traumatic show, watching Grand Army. And there was a scene where this little girl is really struggling with her mental health. Yeah. And she's in the bed, she's lying down. It's been a couple days since something traumatic happened to her. And she's really spiraling. And so one day she's in her bed and she's crying. And I think her mom walked in for some reason. The first time her mom walked in, she's like, aren't you going to get out of bed? And the child didn't respond, stayed in bed. The second time, mom came in and noticed that she was not well. And all she had to do was hold her child. She didn't even say anything. She didn't ask her what was wrong. She just held her. Her child cried. And okay, it's dramatic, but within a minute, sometimes it might take longer with your child. But within a minute, she began to tell her what happened. And I think we know that our children will tell us what's going on. We know that. But I think we also have to create spaces for them to do so. And so that experience was definitely the space that she created to do so. The first time she couldn't do it. Mom couldn't do it. But the second time she did, she was able to create space. And by creating those spaces and by listening to your child, you've got one information. And then you can utilize the supports of, whether it's counselors or advice from other people, get that advice in terms of, what do I do next? Or how do I support my child the best way possible?
I just want to add a little bit to that. I mean, during the pandemic, the trauma was felt. And even sometimes I would be like off of my schedule or not doing the things I loved or off my routine. And even Nicole, you would just say to me, okay, what's going on? Just noticing like, oh, you're noticing something's off. You can feel something's off. You sense something's not right. And then you're like, okay, yeah, no, I gotta go back into my strategies and do the things that I need to do to stay healthy. And we'll talk about those strategies too as well, because it happens to all of us pretty much, I think, but just really noticing, being in tune and seeing.
Thank you. So I flip back because it lands on my slides that are very powerful, and I really don't want people like reading it and then losing you here. But I want to keep you steady, because talking about intergenerational trauma can be quite triggering. And so I want you to be present when we're talking about this, and to think back or to remember times that has been difficult for you. And feel free to even private message us panelists to share your thoughts, and we don't have to read them out loud. You can say, don't read out loud, I just want to share, and it's okay to do that. And you can also send us an email at info@kajengafamily.org if something comes up for you as we talk about intergenerational trauma. So my daughter is a global health science person. And so she's reading her textbook, her psychology textbook, and she says to me, the experience of trauma is not just in one person's experience. It's felt in their bodies, in their DNA. What she tells me is science has figured out that when someone is pregnant, or an experience of trauma that someone experiences within their life, it changes their DNA. It changes their DNA. So the patterns, the connections, I'm not into science, but I'm saying it in a layperson, the way that it connects in the womb changes that child's DNA. So when that child is delivered, their DNA has been changed. That same DNA, if that child continues to experience stress, and we all know immigrant parents, immigrant families, Black families, we've all experienced difficulties, that again changes our DNA, and that passes through generations. I also heard as well, your eggs are formed, a woman's eggs are formed when they're in utero. I just want you to take that in. So my egg was formed when my grandmother was being born. That's huge. And that speaks to intergenerational experiences. So even though you may not go through things directly, even though we didn't go through slavery, or we may not have crossed the transatlantic, or we may not have had to fight in civil war, my God, the civil rights movement.
Yeah, civil war.
Right?
Fight it.
We still have that experience within our DNA, and our parents have it. So the way that my parents parented absolutely impacts the way that I was parented. And sometimes I know that even Caribbean parents have gone through a lot, and so their parenting wasn't always the best. And that parenting has shaped you. And that parenting will also shape you further down. And we know that tremendously with Indigenous people with the residential schools. We know that they continue to experience trauma within their lives. And even though this child that you may know who's Indigenous did not go to residential school, their parents may have gone to residential school. And that experience has changed and transformed them. So how do we support generations to heal? So knowing that information, how do we support generations to heal? And it really takes us knowing this information and generating knowledge. And this knowledge and understanding helps us to parent differently. This knowledge and understanding helps us to manage our emotions differently. This knowledge and understanding also then helps to change generations coming down. So what are race-based, anti-Black race-based experiences? And I wanted to mention this because, you know, growing up in Oshawa, I definitely can agree that I've had these experiences that have shaped who I am. My parents may not have had the same issues growing up. And so even those experiences of, you know, anti-Black racism, that can shape how I felt about myself. It shaped how I felt about the world, and it changed me, similar to it changed Melissa, right? Mm-hmm. And it changes in very different ways, but it creates that change. Mm-hmm. How old do you think children are when they recognize race? Apparently, research shows that children recognize race as young as 3 months old. And so I learned about the fact that I was Black when I was 4, because I was told I was poo or whatever. So that's how I learned. And so I always learned that I was the other. And that continues today. We had a Let's Talk cafe in August, and a parent shared that her young child, who's 5 years old, was experiencing anti-Black racism within his classroom. So he's learned, in kindergarten that he's different. And that experience shapes our child. No matter what my parents did to kind of support me or to guide me, it couldn't address the trauma that I was experiencing, the feeling that I wasn't good enough. And so these are some of the experiences that, our young people experience within schools as well. So we know that, and it's true, it's not a debate, that young people experience racism within the school system. It's through the way that the system is developed. It's through the curriculum that doesn't represent them. It's through the teachers that don't look like them. They definitely experience it. So basically, what I'm telling you is that your children are probably going to experience some form of racism. So how do we support our children? How do we help and guide them the best way possible? And these are some examples of what race-based experiences look like. So microaggressions. Can I touch your hair? It's beautiful.
No.
Denial of the issue. It never happened. I'm not racist. What are you talking about?
Your Canadians aren't racist.
Gaslighting, white fragility. There was a scene someone sent me from This Is Us when the young man, his sister was talking to him, and she was saying, I never knew that you experienced racism. And she's crying and crying. And her brother's like, why are you crying? Why are you crying? Didn't happen to you. You're all good. So that experience, being surveilled.
Mm-hmm.
So police or teachers constantly looking at what you're doing, watching what you're doing, restricting you from access and not being able to access the same things as other young people do, and feeling excluded. What it happens to children when they experience race-based trauma, and I apologize for our slide, is the emotional, psychological, and physical symptoms that are experienced by Black families and people of color due to the perpetual experiences of race-based trauma. The exposure to and witnessing racial discrimination, thank you, and institutional racism has a profound impact on their mental health. So similar to the symptoms that I talked about, sometimes, as Black parents, it's important for us to pay attention to this. And I give an example where I had a young man that I was seeing for therapy, and constantly having issues in the school, constantly having issues. And parent would say, this doesn't happen at home. This is only happening at school. And so within a very short period of time, he was streamed into a smaller classroom, and that still wasn't working. And through a very small period of time, he started spending the time in the office and then getting suspended. And he was in grade 1. And it automatically looks like, okay, this child isn't behaving, this child isn't doing this, but really and truly, let's talk about what are these experiences with this young person. Why is he feeling unsafe? What is he struggling with? What's happening? Children exposed to or witnessing race trauma. So whether even, and I can give an example of, I experienced race trauma, but my parents also experienced it. And I remember, a very simple incident. I mean, my parents are Caribbean, so they have a different lived experience. But there were times where we were driving in a community or a neighborhood. My dad liked to look at houses at night or whatever.
Even during the day.
He liked to look at houses. So one time we were driving down, and the police officer stopped us and, asked us what we were doing in the neighborhood, all this other stuff. And my dad is a Caribbean man, and he will fight for himself. He grew up with, people that look like him. He knows about himself, and he just like, why you stop me? Why you stop me? Why are you looking at me? It's against the law to like walk around and drive around in communities is what's happening. But that experience of me watching that, okay, I probably was like 9, and that stuck with me. So just to tell you how those experiences stick with our children, and they often become worried or preoccupied with their own safety. For me, if there's a police officer following me, I'm driving around. I'm finding a safe place to be because I don't trust it. And so that speaks to how, children who experience that, they constantly have that fear. And we need to talk about the media, because the media coverage or what they show us is images of, Black people being in a certain way, or Black people needing to look a certain way, or even girls needing to look a certain way, or boys needing to look a certain way. And that shapes them too. Because if you don't identify, you don't connect with those images or positive images, then you become disconnected from it. And when you see images of people that look like you, and they're in very traumatic positions, or they're, the wanted person, or the person just fought for guns and being shot, that's what they start to see. Is that my future? Is that what happens to people like me? So those things definitely change them. I gave a lot of information, and so I want to be respectful of the impact that it can have. So please take some time to pause and reflect. And we'll also take some time to answer your questions as well. Be aware of how your body feels. If you're feeling like I hadn't got my tea yet, go get your tea as well, and give yourself the break that you need. Thank you. Did you guys want to read the questions for us?
Yeah, I was going to say that.
We have a question here from one of the attendees. So she said, my mom had a horrible childhood and she's never dealt with trauma. I always had high anxiety. I started losing my hair before I could walk, and my mother was told it was because of stress. I've always had symptoms of abuse but never experienced it myself. When I was an adult and my mom shared her childhood, it made sense to me. That's the first part of the question. And the second part says, as a white person, how can I help to not make feel like they are the other or different? How can we undo trauma? That's the question.
Thank you so much for sharing, and I'm so sorry to hear. I think definitely your mom's mom experienced that same, feeling that passed down to her, that's passed down to you. And so I think just even the knowledge and the recognition that exists is really important, because then it's not about, what's wrong with you as a person. It's around what happened to me, right? What happened to that family. Healing trauma isn't just you and I sitting in a session and talking. It's also feeling, it's also having good experiences. It's also, listening to music and your favorite song, and just doing the movement and body things that your body needs to heal. And so if you're ready to engage in that journey, I definitely encourage you to, seek out counseling for that information, but also seek out different ways to help you heal that's in a healthy way. It's hard too as well when you have family members or people who are struggling or having a hard time. And I think being aware of that, and, trying really hard not to blame them or to, create undue stress for them, but be loving and kind and compassionate toward them, as hard as it can be. Because sometimes, when people experience trauma or they experience anxiety, sometimes they project some of their feelings and their stuff on us, and we're left with dealing with their stuff, right? So also intergenerational through our bodies, but also through their behavior. And it's definitely, as you shared, that you dealt with your mom's stuff, her anxiety and her stuff. And so being really conscious of that and placing really good boundaries on yourself, but also always using love and kindness towards your mommy, because it's not intentional. It's not intentional. It's all she knows. And it's her way of surviving. It's her way of being here on this planet, is to experience those things. So approach her with loving and kindness as much as possible. And I guess I wanted to make sure to say again, how do you undo trauma? Understanding that it exists, acknowledging that it exists, getting the information on how it exists, and creating different experiences for yourself, for your children around you within your family.
I think there was a couple too.
And reading books.
To be an ally too as well.
And be an ally?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
I think the second part was how do I...
Oh, that's a question.
Sorry, it's part of the question.
Undo.
Okay, yeah, undo that trauma. Okay, sorry. Education too, I think. Reading up on it, for sure. Any other questions?
No other questions for now.
Okay. So we're going to try to switch gears and play a quick video. It's about 5 minutes long. So this is a good time to grab your tea and I'll play the video for you. This is mine.
School where remote learning can be as remote as you want, like a Verbo.
Looks like next up is Scout.
Hi, I'm here. So these are...
In the mid-90s, the CDC and Kaiser Permanente discovered an exposure that dramatically increased the risk for 7 out of 10 of the leading causes of death in the United States. In high doses, it affects brain development, the immune system, hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed. Folks who are exposed in very high doses have triple the lifetime risk of heart disease and lung cancer, and a 20-year difference in life expectancy. And yet doctors today are not trained in routine screening or treatment. Now, the exposure I'm talking about is not a pesticide or a packaging chemical. It's childhood trauma. Okay, what kind of trauma am I talking about here? I'm not talking about failing a test or losing a basketball game. I am talking about threats that are so severe or pervasive that they literally get under our skin and change our physiology. Things like abuse or neglect, or growing up with a parent who struggles with mental illness or substance dependence. Now, for a long time, I viewed these things in the way I was trained to view them, either as a social problem, refer to social services, or as a mental health problem, refer to mental health services. And then something happened to make me rethink my entire approach. When I finished my residency, I wanted to go someplace where I felt really needed, someplace where I could make a difference. So I came to work for California Pacific Medical Center, one of the best private hospitals in Northern California, and together we opened a clinic in Bayview Hunters Point, one of the poorest, most underserved neighborhoods in San Francisco. Now, prior to that point, there had been only one pediatrician in all of Bayview to serve more than 10,000 children. So we hung a shingle and we were able to provide top quality care regardless of ability to pay. It was so cool. We targeted the typical health disparities: access to care, immunization rates, asthma hospitalization rates, and we hit all of our numbers. We felt very proud of ourselves. But then I started noticing a disturbing trend. A lot of kids were being referred to me for ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. But when I actually did a thorough history and physical, what I found was that for most of my patients, I couldn't make a diagnosis of ADHD. Most of the kids I was seeing had experienced such severe trauma that it felt like something else was going on. Somehow, I was missing something important. Now, before I did my residency, I did a master's degree in public health. And one of the things that they teach you in public health school is that if you're a doctor and you see 100 kids that all drink from the same well, and 98 of them develop diarrhea, you can go ahead and write that prescription for dose after dose after dose of antibiotics, or you can walk over and say, what the hell is in this well? So I began reading everything that I could get my hands on about how exposure to adversity affects the developing brains and bodies of children. And then one day, my colleague walked into my office and he said, "Dr. Burke, have you seen this?" In his hand was a copy of a research study called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. That day changed my clinical practice and ultimately my career. The Adverse Childhood Experiences Study is something that everybody needs to know about. It was done by Dr. Vince Felitti at Kaiser and Dr. Bob Onda at the CDC, and together they asked 17,500 adults about their history of exposure to what they called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. Those include physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, physical or emotional neglect, parental mental illness, substance dependence, incarceration, parental separation or divorce, or domestic violence. For every yes, you would get a point on your ACE score. And then what they did was they correlated these ACE scores against health outcomes. What they found was striking. Two things. Number one, ACEs are incredibly common. 67% of the population had at least one ACE, and 12.6%, 1 in 8, had 4 or more ACEs. The second thing that they found was that there was a dose-response relationship between ACEs and health outcomes.
And I think we'll leave it there because I think that's a summary of really what we shared. So yes, it's very common. And the second piece around absolutely changing the outcomes for young people.
There was a sorry to interrupt. There was a comment that I want to sort of touch base on before you go further. This was from Stephanie. Older generations and much of our generation as well continue to resist counseling. Counseling and therapy continue to resist counseling and therapy because of the stigma that comes with mental health. We can choose to begin our own path to healing. The healing of our loved ones is not for us to carry. It's a difficult reality because we care so deeply.
Sorry, Nada, was that the question?
It was that was the comment that she had.
Yeah. And that's part of why we're here, because of the stigma, because of there has been a stigma. There was no when I was growing up, there was no sad. You're always happy. Why are you sad? Like, get up, get out of bed. You need to be happy. You need to show that affection, that affect. Like, you could never be sad. And I think that's why we're here, to show that therapy can be is for to help people, and also that mental health and mental well-being are two very real things. Thank you. I agree. Yeah. So why are my children not lazy? And I think that's why you all came here, is to understand why. And we want to be able to provide you some strategies and tips in terms of moving forward. And then we'll take the final questions at the end. So to summarize, difficulties that our children experience impacts their thinking. How do I solve problems? How do I work with people? How do I express myself? It influences, how they are able to make decisions. Obviously, we said that develops later for young people, but it becomes more impaired or more difficult when difficult things happen. And we learned that having difficult things happen in our life is actually something quite common that people experience. it affects our affect. So it affects the way that we look towards other people. And it goes back to what I was sharing around, you know, a very outgoing person who's suddenly become withdrawn and disconnected. It may also be the young child who you're disciplined and they've lost emotion. They're just numb right now. And so it also impacts that child who becomes super clingy and always wants to be with you, or even refusing to go to school. It impacts our social, so even our relationships with other people. And so that one person that used to have great friends and get along great with their friends, all of a sudden that experience has changed for them. They don't have the same type of relationships with their friends. They're like, I don't need friends. I don't need anyone around me. And or they're very manipulative, or peers very manipulative with their friends, right? They'll start drama amongst their friends. And they're quick to cut off their friends. So they move to different friendships on a very regular basis. And it also impacts their behavior. So, you know, as Nadine had shared around, you know, ADHD and those impulsive behaviors, when young people experience difficult things, it also can increase in impulsive behaviors or compulsive behaviors. So they'll just do it automatically. They'll just take something. I like it, they'll take it, and not really understanding, you know, remorse or repercussions for their actions, because they don't see that far. They just see in the now. How do I protect myself in this moment? And as they get older without support, it gets much different. And sometimes it has, you know, challenges with their touch. They have a difficulty when people touch them. They feel they're not worthy. They think about being not worthy. They may stop, you know, hygiene. A lot of times, a lot of young people that I support, and also, you know, speaking with parents, you know, they're not showering or not taking care of their hygiene as well as they used to. And their automatic response is, oh my God, my child's lazy, or they're too lazy to get out of bed and change. Yeah, sometimes, but you know, when you really look down to what's happening, it could be more than just that. And also changing their morals. So, you know, the principles about right and wrong definitely change. So if you learn anything today, okay, there's another thing to learn, is always look beyond the behavior. So always look beyond what you're seeing. And messy room, tantrums, laziness, look beyond those things. And don't always be quick to kind of, you know, blame the person or blame the child. So we thought we'd switch it up a little bit, make it fun for you. This is our last video. It's only a minute. Give me a second as I switch to it.
So I'll set the scene. This is a parenting scene, and we just want to know what you would do in this situation. How would you react if your child was doing this? Okay. If I can get this. There we go.
I hate us already.
Well, technically, she said she hates you.
Okay. Barbie! No, this isn't even a real Barbie. You've got a real Barbie at home that Santa gave you a few weeks ago.
Santa got me a fat Barbie. I want a skinny Barbie.
She's not fat. She's body positive.
Dana, hey, if you put the doll back, I'll get you a giant ice cream sundae.
So you're rewarding this behavior? What are you thinking?
You handle it. Juan, come on, get out of there, please.
Don't hit me. Don't hit me. Don't
What?
hit me.
I didn't. I didn't hit him, okay? I never have hit him. I would never hit a kid.
No. Right now, you're not getting lunch or dinner. We're not starving people here, okay? I have this under control. I am so...
Yeah, Lizzie, you body positive whore.
Okay, you're done. Give me that. Give it to me. Hey, just give me that now. Oh, yeah? Yeah, really looks like you've got it.
We got it.
No, we're not. No, we're not doing this. Someone videotaping this? Pete, where are you? Where's Pete? You're done. Oh, great. You're out there.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Hey, sweetie, I brought the car up, save you a little walking time.
We had a front space.
Well, it's still closer.
Hey, Pete, look at my pretty new doll.
Hello.
You guys had a chuckle?
So what would you do? Well, if you were in this situation?
Carolina said she would die. Any other thoughts?
Do you have the pulpit?
Leave the kids at the store. Says the 20-year-old. Yeah. Buy the Barbie. Oh, Victoria's good. I would have bought the Barbie too. I'm like, you know what? We'll just get the Barbie. We'll talk about this later. Barbie might go missing, whatever. But yeah.
I love Barbie. Yeah. And this is definitely an exemplified version of a temper tantrum in the store, but I think we've all seen it. We've all, I've had a child steal, actually, not even try to fight me on it, just take it when we were in Walmart, but just, yeah, that situation where I want it, but there was always something that was going on. There was something deeper, not just the behavior.
And definitely, I'm sure many of you have experienced tantruming children, no matter what's going on. For this family, if you've ever seen this amazing movie called Instant Family, it's definitely, these young people were just in foster care, just moved into this new family. And so the transition obviously brought challenges for them. So it definitely came with some space, but it's a really good understanding of, what our young people have to go through.
Yeah. And definitely, and it's based on a true story too, as well. This couple adopted three children at one time, and dealing with their trauma and having them to see, like, how do they heal from there? How do we move on? And that's where we come into resiliency.
So I'm going to go through many slides in, I think I have 10 more minutes. So hold on to your chairs, but also, check out our website at kajengafamily.org to learn a little bit more, and, feel free to connect with us as well. So resiliency is my favorite word on the planet, which means the ability to persevere and achieve good outcomes in the face of adversity. And this morning, my daughter was reading The Life of Malcolm X. And if you know a little bit about the life of Malcolm X, he went through a lot of stuff. But to become a man who was a leader for so many different people, and a man that we continue to talk about and learn today, shows that ability to persevere. So just because we've had difficult experiences within our family, within our community, it doesn't mean that there isn't opportunities to do really well or opportunities to change. And so again, this is another question for you to all share within the chat, as well as a question answer. How do you build resilience in your life? What are your suggestions? What are things that you've done to build resiliency, to build up your capacity to be able to survive or manage through difficulties that occur? There are many different building blocks for resiliency. And so I talked about, building your talents, doing something that makes you happy, whether it's taking pictures or selfies and posting on Instagram, anything that kind of makes you happy, that brings that joy within you, that builds resiliency. Having mentorships. So when you know or you experience difficulties in your life and you want to be able to support your child, developing that connection and mentorship with other people is really important. For my daughter, I really enhanced and believed in the possibilities of mentorship, and I set it up. I set up her aunties to be able to be there for her whenever she's struggling or didn't feel like she can connect with me. And that's something that's important to do for your child. Builds up their connections and their supports. And if you don't have any, there's definitely resources available to support your child. Enhance their strengths. So even when they're struggling, be okay and encourage them to figure out what are they good at, whether it's in that moment to as they develop over the years. Create supportive environments where children feel that they can talk, they can share, they can, be themselves, and there's no criticism and there's no one telling them don't do it or that's not right. Supporting education. And so one of the things that we know in slave culture was that they kept slaves from being able to read, because they knew that the second they learned to read, it brought them power. W.e. Du Bois would say. It brought them power. So education, as much as reading to learning about different things, brings power, brings up possibility for building resiliency. Really good video by Maya Angelou where she talks about her own experiences growing up and how she developed resiliency. She spent, after a traumatic event, she spent a year just reading, just learning about things and just listening to other people. And that was really instrumental in her being able to be this amazing ancestors that we call today. And nurture, so creating opportunities for love and for connection. Creating teachable moments. One of the things that, we used to do as foster parents is always create those teachable moments, and we argue in a healthy way, show them good resolve, give them opportunities to act out different things. So first day of school, we would get them to act it out. We would do a cooking show. I don't know if your family does this, but whenever we cook something great, everyone would get involved and we would narrate ourselves cooking. It's a very fun activity. Now there's videos, you can actually do videos of it. Create opportunities to encourage kids to talk about and learn about feelings. There's more than just happy, mad, and sad. There's actually, I think, over 100 different feelings. And so helping them learn about different feelings and how that impacts their body can really help them to get in touch with those difficult emotions and be okay to feel it. Because it's okay to feel anger and anxiety. Those feelings have points. There's a reason for that, and it's okay.
Important to know that you are not an angry person. You just feel that anger in the moment. So separating the feeling from the person.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And it's okay. It's okay to be angry. We all have those moments. I'm sure we did the last 4 years, get angry at different things that was happening in the US. So it's the same thing. Resolve. I know that my parents, they had a real hard time saying, I'm sorry. And don't be that parent. Be okay to say, I'm sorry. Be okay to admit or discuss when there's a difficulty that's happened. Be okay to teach your child how to repair relationships, how to make up with people. Just because you may not feel that it's your fault or you had nothing to do with it, it's okay to say, I'm sorry that you felt this way. And that teaches them empathy, because remember, as I said, empathy doesn't develop until well in their 20s. So you want to be able to teach that skill for young people so that they can learn to moderate that feeling healthily. Storytelling, we shared before, is really like my favorite thing to do. When I was growing up, I loved books, but narrative is also a way that we teach. We teach morals, we teach about our culture, we teach lessons through storytelling, and use that opportunity with your kids. So either you're exploring books or you're making up stories with your family. That really helps to kind of teach lessons to your children and give them that ability to demonstrate their creative side. So I have a story that I'll say in 2 minutes, but the problem is about this young man who realizes that he has a problem. And the problem is this, this little cloud that hangs around him everywhere he goes. And as he, realizes it's there, he starts to become really afraid of the problem, and he starts to run away from it. He tries to avoid it. He tries to do things to hide away from it. And the problem continues to follow him. What he realizes, every time the problem continues to follow it, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And soon the problem gets so big that it starts to suck him in, and he feels that he can't get away from that problem, and that problem is always there. And then all of a sudden, he starts to realize, if I try to just find out what's going on and look into the problem, maybe that will change my outcome. And he takes a minute and he looks into the problem, and he realized that within the problem, there's an opportunity, that the problem wasn't actually that big. It was really his reaction to that problem. And he starts to realize that, yeah, I can solve the problem. And he goes along his way, realizing that problems bring opportunities. And as we know, and as we learned today, the problem of dealing with our child being lazy brings an opportunity for us to make shifts and changes within our child's life. Understanding wellness for your child. I know someone asked before, how do you, take care of your child or support your child when your child is struggling? A lot of it is to also be able to take care of yourself. And so being able to take care of yourself and being able to attend to your needs is helpful in terms of, helping you to be in the right space to help your child. And it's okay to tell your child, mommy needs or daddy needs like 5 minutes. I just need to collect my head. I just need to bring myself down. And when you're down, then you can address the child, or then you can deal with the problem at hand. And I think that speaks wonder for your child, because you're teaching your child that whenever you feel like your emotions are at a 10, that yes, you need to do some work to bring yourself down. So the same way as you do that for yourself, you do that for your child. So helping them to recognize their emotions, validating how they feel, It's all right. I get it. You feel sad. It's okay. Reduce your busy schedules. There's too much going on. Let's bring it down. This week, no dance. Don't worry about the dance teacher. I got you. You don't feel like it. You can bring it down. It's okay. And then seeking support if needed. Identify stressful situations. Teaching your child to pause and take deep breaths. Reinforcing empathy for your children. And that also teaches them about empathy. So taking their perspective. Really and truly, children are just going along with what you kind of set up for them. So understand that sometimes there's things that they don't understand. A lot of children hate transitions, and that's something we also didn't talk about either, because we know that transitions are very hard for adults, even in themselves, right? So for children, it's really hard. And so being able to empathize where they're coming from and, be at their level really will help to go wonders in terms of the behavior management and support. Teach your child to be a thought detective. So helping them understand, when do you have thoughts that are not helpful? And sometimes for little kids, you see it as, they're trying to work on an assignment and they trying, and they keep like not getting it right. And they say, oh, I'm so stupid. Oh, I'm not doing this right. That's what you're teaching them. So you're teaching them to say, hold on a second. What's happening in your thoughts right now? What's going on? What are you saying to yourself? And how are you feeling saying that you're not smart enough? And is it true? Is it true you're not smart? What's the evidence that says that you're not smart? And using that kind of detective work really helps them to start to really critically analyze our thoughts. Because we all know as adults, our thoughts sometimes can run or manage our thinking a lot of the times. We worry a lot, and we don't often take the time to really sit down and think about what's going on in our thoughts. And so teaching your child to do this can also help you do the same thing, because there definitely is thoughts that we have that, is not always true.
Productive
right?
or helpful, yeah.
Exactly.
Is it true? Is it kind? Is it helpful? Yeah.
Absolutely. And mindfulness, being able to teach your child how to deal with stress, practicing yoga. I do that a lot. We did that a lot with the fosters too.
A lot.
We had like yoga nights where you just incorporated that. So that's something that they can learn how to do and develop those skills from a very young age, which is really important because you want to establish something that they can keep for the rest of their life.
And I know there's always been a little bit of a taboo with yoga and Christianity, or yoga and different religions, but
Really?
It's rooted in science too as well. So there's scientific benefits with different movements and postures and breathing exercises. Because my parents always shied away. They're like, oh, yoga, why are you meditating? But again, it's a practice that rooted in science that can really help.
What science says is, even a breath can really slow down your physiological responses and slow down the cortisol that's like jumping off all the time, especially when you're stressed. This is hard for adults to do, so I'm keeping this up for an extra second. Practice self-compassion. Practice kindness. I said to someone today, you need to be your best friend always. You got you, because at the end of the day, it's you yourself. So loving yourself, showing compassion to yourself, being your best cheerleader, you're teaching that also to your children. And you're changing that intergenerational experiences. Because my mother was never kind to herself. And I know my grandmother was not kind to herself. So even that self-compassion to yourself and producing that to your child can change generations. Got to be your best friend, right?
Your child
Me,
watches
myself, and
how
I.
you view yourself. They get
Absolutely.
their self-esteem from how your self-esteem is. They look at you for that.
Absolutely.
Are you just singing?
I tried.
And then quickly just touch on now in school, we're trying to make well-being and mental well-being a priority because of the stats, because it's so high that we could have 5 students in our class or 6 or more with mental health and mental well-being concerns.
I think last year you had like 12 IEPs.
Yeah, I had 11 IEPs last year, and just only that, but just where are they all coming from, knowing what's happening. So, and number one thing we were taught, and I'm doing training too as well with work, is making well-being the first priority. So over marks, over curriculum, over lessons, it's well-being. It's checking in. It's how are you doing? It's getting to know your students, having that growth mindset that you were saying about
I can't do this. Well, I don't know how to do it yet. Having that yet mentality. Understanding over marks. I love it when everyone's like, I got an A, I got a B. Can I get an A? And I was like, it has nothing to, you could get a billion A's and not understand the material you've just memorized, but it's understanding the material, understanding what the teacher is telling you over the marks that you get. It's about that continual learning, building those healthy habits, those scheduling, even as we're doing the homeschooling, just having that schedule and that routine from home, right? Foster those healthy relationships and help them to cultivate friendships. Even now, because a lot of students have moved digitally, how do they make friends? And they are yearning for that social time. They're yearning for that connection. They're yearning for that friendship. And if they're an only child, if their family is not well connected in the community, they are like, they're trying to create separate meets outside of our meet, and we're like, you can't do that. You're only 8 and 9, but they are desperately seeking that connection. So as a parent, it's good that you facilitate that, because then you can kind of control the friends that you know, and you know their families, and you can kind of facilitate that relationship. So I encourage you to facilitate friendships in a community for them, and inspire that greatness with mentors and role models. And yes, how do I motivate my child? But if they see lawyers, doctors, mechanics, engineers, if they know people who do those things, and they're able to connect with different people in different careers and pathways, and in STEM and in science and all those, they will be inspired, right? They can't make that connection sitting and reading a book, but they can if they know that, oh, your uncle built that elevator or that escalator, your aunt's the one that developed this. So having those mentors and really trying to inspire them to achieve great things. I told my students, I'm like, you guys curing cancer, you know that, right? Like you're eradicating it with a pill. Like that's your generation. Like and the pandemic and COVID. Well, they're still young to do COVID, because it can't go on any longer than this year. But I'm just saying, like, yo, you guys have to end it, right? Yeah, absolutely. You have to end it, and just inspiring that greatness.
And also having mentors that look like them. I could definitely say that we were honored to have some really great leaders within our own family systems as well. And that's definitely helped us and propel our family. So we're wanting the next generation to do better, but also buy us Maseratis for all the hard work that we put into parenting them.
They're taking care of you. Be kind to your kids.
So we've come to the end of our presentation. I would like to thank everyone for sticking with us and staying with the information. I hope that it was valuable to all of you. And I know that there probably is some questions, so we'll give some time for any questions.
Questions or comments? Anyone want to comment? Or is it like at the end of my class where everyone's still here, but nobody's really here? They've all fallen asleep.
Oh, geez.
And then I think, oh, wow, I did an awesome lesson. No one was interrupting, but they fell asleep. Is it like that time?
There are a couple of comments.
Okay.
Someone says, fantastic overview. You touched on so many valuable areas. Thank you. Another attendee said, thanks for the great information. I felt like I was involved in a conversation. Then we have wonderful presentation. Thank you. That's all of the comment we have here. And yes, some in the Q&A as well. You guys did an amazing job. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you so much for the comments. I greatly appreciate it. And if you leave with anything, your kids are not lazy. They'll be happy to hear that. So you don't have to say that anymore. You can say, yo, what's up? Clean your room. Clean your room.
Let's make a game. Practice store. Let's play that we're at the store. We have to fold up all our clothes. And like we're working at the store. Maybe something fun.
We'd also like to kind of give some time to talk about our exciting new programs at Kajenga Wellness Project.
So we were able to launch a family outreach program, which is designed specifically to support families who are struggling because of COVID-19. Our wish and goal is to have a outreach worker to connect with you directly, provide you any support or resources that you may require, as well as crisis intervention. So we did talk about and touch on several different subjects, but if you're ever querying, like, you know what, I need to talk more about my situation, I need some solutions and strategies that can work for my family, then definitely connect with us, because we will love to be able to guide you and walk you through those steps. And feel free to challenge us and let us know it's not going to work, but try something else. So that's the purpose of our family outreach program. And we're also developing a parent support program. And this is specifically for parents who are really struggling with their children's behavior. And there's multiple involvement, or there's people saying something's going on, we need some support. So we're really creating a group to provide you support and information, and really, you know, spending that time to kind of work with you around some of the skills and strategies really important in terms of changing your child's behavior or managing a more happier and healthier household. It is definitely for parents, caregivers, and guardians, or even kin parents, foster parents, whoever needs extra support. Hopefully within a couple of weeks after that, we'll start a support group for children to give them that, you know, learning as well. And I know that sometimes counseling is hard to kind of bring up. So we always say support group or a social skills group. We're running a couple right now too, as a way to kind of reach out to our young people.
I have another comment here.
Oh, great. Okay.
So this person says, thank you for this presentation. Great information. I'm a college student in Los Angeles, CA. As part of my class, I had to attend a webinar, and I'm glad I chose this one.
Yeah! Did you say California? Is that what I heard?
Yes.
Oh my God. How you doing?
California
How you doing?
in the house. That's awesome. That's so lucky.
Thank you.
Cool.
I also have a comment from the Q&A question. Actually, this person says, are there free mental health support programs for kids?
Absolutely. So I'm going to plug it in. We're definitely offering free mental health support with Infarada Center for Excellence, which is one of the other organizations that I lead. There's also your mental health support agencies as well. So if you are interested, please reach out to me at info@kajengafamily.org. And I think Anita will put that in the chat for everybody. Feel free to reach out to me if you need some other resources or connections. Because of COVID, we're doing virtual and video and phone calls only, but let me tell you, it's amazing. I thought it would be difficult doing video calls with kids, but it's actually the best hour, 45 minutes of my experiences. It's so much fun. And definitely the kids are really engaged in this process and do some really deep learning and processing difficult experiences. We also have support groups as well available for young people as young as 6, 7, 8 to teenagers. So absolutely, please reach out. Yes, definitely. We're going to post all of our recordings, all of our workshops online for everyone to see as well. Again, feel free to reach out if you ever need additional support or information that would be helpful.
I also have 2 questions here. Someone says, would you have all the recordings of the webinar available to the public? And then I have another one that says, how can I have an open and honest conversations with my teenager? Then a third question says,
so can I ask? I did the first one, but I'll do the second one because I'm gonna forget. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
My memory, like, you know, after 40, like it just the synapses is not working really well. See, I even forgot the question. How can I? Teenagers are hard, but let me tell you, take them out for some food, fill their belly, take them for a drive. You get so much information, so much information. So it's always about making time, and just get a glimpse into their world and take it at their pace. So get a glimpse into the world, you know, talk to them about what their experiences are, validate how they're feeling. Because for young people, they just need to know that you're there and you're listening. You don't need to fix it. And I removed that slide, but I should have kept it in. Parents, you don't need to fix it. Your kids have enough strategies that you're going to teach them, enough strength that you're going to build within them and build that resiliency that they'll be able to figure it out. They need you to be there to support them and to be their 100% rally. Just like Camilla is to Joe Biden, you got to be to your children. You got to be their ride or die, right? And so that kind of support is what they need. And just, you know, keep inching it in. So set special dates with your child, whether it's in the house or in the community. Make that something that's part of your everyday. Eventually they'll get used to it. One of the things that young people tell me the most that they struggle with is this arguing and bickering with their parents. Oh, do this, do this, do this. You haven't done this. You haven't done the dishes. You haven't done this. I know it's hard. I grew up with a mother that liked to nag, but it's not helpful. It's not helpful. So as much as you can, try to really work on forging that relationship, because through the relationship, believe it or not, my child gets up at 4:30 in the morning. I come home, the dishes are done. In the morning when I come down, yeah, the dishes are done.
Because I do them.
And sometimes she makes breakfast.
No, because I do the dishes.
No, she makes me breakfast.
But I do the dishes. She does not do the dishes.
Somebody does it.
It's me. I stopped arguing. I pick my battles. You know what? She can help take care of me.
She makes
when
breakfast.
she is old, sir. And I'm old and gray.
Oh, sorry, Riley. What was the next question?
The next one says, how can you bring up mentorship in a healthy way without a child feeling like they're not making negative comparisons or feeling like they're not good enough to the mentor?
I think I would start with interest. So if your child is interested, for example, in science, I might kind of encourage them to visit the science center or might do things around that and then say, oh, by the way, I know this person who's a scientist, right? Or if they're into basketball or whatever they're into. So I use their interest as a way to segue into getting them a mentor and then slowly back off. And I did the same with my daughter. Like there's things that she was interested in that I was like, yeah, I don't even like soccer, for instance. And so I connected her with people that, you know, supported her through that. And I think using their interest really helps to build the mentorship. An example is gaming, because I hate gaming world, but kids love the gaming world. So finding someone who's really good at gaming, your kid will be so happy. That would be their best mentor ever. And colleges and universities also have, you know, students who also mentor as well, and they do background checks for them too. So that's another avenue to connect with as well.
I just want to add something to that too. Like even as parents, us being mentors to our children, I know Nicole had made a comment, said, I wasn't interested, so I had her connected to somebody else. But I think also as parents, sometimes we can fake the funk, right? So even if
I did go to the soccer games. Yeah,
exactly. So even if it's something that we don't like, but they like it, that's also another way to also build on your relationship, build on that, where they can feel comfortable enough that they can come to you and, you know, have an open relationship with you when you go also fake the funk, right? There's times we have to fake the funk a lot as parents. So I think that also helps too.
Absolutely.